Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our session on developing a payment for ecosystem service framework in Ethiopia. My name is Zablon Adane. I'm an associate with the World Resources Institute, and I'm joined by Ms. Ribka Teklu, who is a senior project manager at Helvetas, and Dr. Jemal Ahmed, who is an assistant professor at Sabah University, specializing on hydroeconomics. Unfortunately, our third speaker, Mr. Habitamu Tamir from the Abbay Basin, the Blue Nile Basin Development Office, can join us because of connectivity issues. But I'll try to cover his slides on the introduction and giving the context on Ethiopia. First, I'll start with a little bit of context for those of you who may not be too familiar on Ethiopia. Ethiopia is severely exposed to land degradation, which has a heavy impact on livelihoods and economic activities, obviously. In fact, 80% of the Ethiopian highlands are considered degraded, and you can see in the map in dark green here that the degradation severity is actually very high in the Ethiopian highlands. And this degradation is driven by the steep topography of the Ethiopian highlands, but mostly by human pressures and dependence on natural resources, unsustainable farming practices, and other related livelihood components. In response to that, extensive land restoration and watershed management have been occurring for the past 50 years, since the 1970s. That the sustainability and success of these restoration activities has been fairly limited. And this is related to a number of factors, but more prominently, these restoration efforts have been project-based and donor-dependent. They're also quota-driven mobilizations of communities, limited community consultation of the restoration activities in advance. And also these restoration activities have not fully integrated livelihood considerations of these communities. More relevant to the topic at hand today is the Koga Reservoir in the Abbay Basin. This Koga Irrigation Reservoir serves around 7,200 hectares and 10,000 small holder households. That's a little less than a hectare per household. But upstream soil erosion is causing siltation and sedimentation of the dam and reducing its storage capacity. In fact, the average erosion rate upstream of the reservoir is around 39 tons per hectare. And climate change stands to make the conditions worse because the climate scenarios indicate in that area the rainfall events are going to be more intense. And coupled with the steep topography, they'll generate a lot more erosion. But PS can offer an approach, an innovative approach to sustainable environmental protection, also advancing climate resilient livelihoods, and a win-win situation to benefit both upstream and downstream communities. What's interesting here is that the community downstream, the irrigators downstream actually do understand the impact of erosion coming upstream and the siltation that's occurring in their reservoir. So there's an opportunity and there's a willingness to pay from their end. So there's an opportunity to showcase what nature-based solutions can do and what PS can do to address water challenges. But this has to consider the legal monitoring enforcement frameworks are critical, but are a missing component in that area. And the PS experience in the area and generally in Ethiopia, specifically on water issues, is very limited. So there isn't much experience for the community to learn from. Actionable data is also scarce, and this includes biophysical, socioeconomic data, ecosystem service evaluation, and also measuring and monitoring of the impacts of these restoration efforts. So with that in mind, I'll pass it over to Ms. Ribka to cover the success project and our activities in the micro watersheds. Ribka, over to you.
Thank you, Zablon. Hello, everyone. I'm just giving you a short presentation on the success project, which is a pilot project in the Koga. Success is a sustainable utilization and conservation through compensation for ecosystem surveys. This project is located in the northwestern of Ethiopia, Amhara region, West Gojam zone, and South and North Mecha Woredas in 5 pilot watersheds. As you see, the 5 micro watersheds are located mostly in the main tributary of the Koga River, which is a main feeder of the Koga Irrigation Dam. We have selected those watersheds based on the criteria selected, mainly the erosion hotspot and the population and the topography taken into consideration. And this project is starting on October 2022. It's almost end up in the coming October 2023. In this project, we have main activities in the phase 1 of this project. The first one is we are establishing a baseline. We have also engaged community and the government at all levels. We try to establish working platforms from the regional up to the local level at watershed level. We have also done a cost-benefit analysis in order to show the evidence-based information for the downstreams and upstreams. And also we have also established and support a legal frameworks like the watershed bylaws, and we are supporting for establishment of a PS proclamation and a national water use chart. And we are also initiated a land restoration initiatives that are highly practiced in the upper catchment of Koga Irrigation Dam. Next, please. Generally, the general concept of PS in the Koga watershed have like this. We have 2 entities in the upstreams and downstreams. In the upper catchment of the Koga Irrigation Dam, we have a population or watershed inhabitants in the 5 micro watersheds, and there is also a problem of high erosion hotspot in the upper catchment, and there is a very high sedimentation is coming from the upper catchment of these watersheds. And we have Koga Irrigation Dam as the downstream, and the irrigation water reserves also living based on this irrigation system. So the upstream communities are providing watershed management services in different activities for land and water restoration activities are having done by the communities in the upper catchment. The downstream users or the irrigation water users are benefited through reduced siltation, flood risk mitigation, aquifer recharge, and the biodiversity service. In return of this benefit, the downstream water users should also benefit to the upper streams, and the upper streams are really improved their livelihood, and the watershed activities are improved the conservation activities in the upper catchment. So there will be a mutual benefit from the upstreams and the downstreams in this case. Next, please. Next slide. In general, the system will create a sustainable financing system by creating or linking the upstream ecosystem services with the downstream ecosystem service receivers. By doing this, the upstream or the ecosystem service providers, the Abbay Basin under the major watersheds and the pilot micro watersheds, there are farmers actively engaging in land restoration and watershed management practice in the upper catchment. On the other hand, we have a downstream ecosystem service receivers, the Koga Irrigation Dam water users. This benefit should be just going through a sustainable financing system. The downstream will support the upper streams through paying or compensating an ecosystem service that helps for the conservation of the livelihoods and the resilience building in the upper catchment. The downstreams also benefit from the upper catchment through the reducing of siltation and improved water flows. In the middle, we are serving as a project, as a facilitators, the Ministry of Water and Energy, the World Resource Institute, Helvetas Swiss Inter Corporation, and Abbay Basin Administration Office are serving as a facilitator. So we are trying to create a sustainable financing system in order to have a sustainable land restoration in the upper catchment and continuous water flow and lifespan of the irrigation dam. Next, please. In general, the project have an overall goal, enhanced ecosystem service of watersheds for improved livelihoods of the watershed inhabitants and enhanced lifespan of downstream infrastructure, mainly the Koga Irrigation dam. In this case, we have three main outcomes. The PS mechanism creation. In this outcome, all the enabling environments, the capacity building activities are taken care. In the second outcome, PS pilot implementation, all the pilot mechanisms are tested. The land restoration, the negotiation, the agreements, all are taken care in the outcome 2. Obviously, in outcome 3, we have a plan to scaling out and communicate to the region, further in the country, in other basins in the country. So by having those main outcomes, we have different and many activities at all outcome level, and we have also engaged with multi-stakeholder engagement approach, and all the governments are involved in those activities. Next, please. Next, the business case will be presented by Dr. Jemal. Dr. Jemal, over to you.
Thank you, Ribka, and hi, everyone. So one of the activities mentioned in the previous slides is to conduct a cost-benefit analysis to establish the business case for payment for ecosystem service interventions. So my presentation will focus on the way we conduct the cost-benefit analysis and the results on the same. So we consider the business as usual scenario versus the PS intervention in our cost-benefit analysis, and we collected data using key informant interviews, focus group discussions, field observations, and I think the pictures on the right show some of the field photos. And of course, literature review. You know, in cost-benefit analysis, literature is very instrumental. So we try to identify the costs and benefits of the PS interventions. So we identified 4 costs. Implementation cost is to implement the conservation structures because they need different inputs. So we consider that one. And the maintenance cost is in relation to, you know, conservation structures require periodic maintenance. So we account that one in the maintenance cost. And the third cost is opportunity cost, which refers to the situation where, you know, especially in farmlands, you know, once the conservation measure is constructed on farmlands, that land cannot be used for crop cultivation. So that could be considered as the opportunity cost of the conservation measures. And finally, we have the transaction cost because implementing the conservation measures requires the input of experts. So we consider that one in the transaction cost. And the benefits are like soil erosion and sediment reduction. We also consider increase in water infiltration and water flow are the other benefits from the conservation structures that will be constructed under the PS scheme. And of course, finally, we have the productivity gains. Of course, we can mention different other benefits like carbon sequestration, biodiversity conservation, but for a PS scheme, we considered only benefits that can be directly compensated by downstream community. Next slide. So, in cost-benefit analysis, we normally make different assumptions. So the first is to make an assumption on the discount rate. We try to review the literature, and we also try to capture the opinion of experts. So we found that 8% is the most widely applied by different studies, especially in the context of Ethiopia. And this is applied over a period of 15-year yields period. Which means the conservation structures are assumed to last for 15-year period. And the maintenance cost also, we classify the conservation measures into two, that is measures that will be built on farmland and measures that will be built on other land uses. And we assume 20% maintenance cost for conservation measures on farmland and 8% for conservation measures on other land uses. So based on this assumption, we try to compute the decision criteria for the cost-benefit analysis. So we consider three decision criteria. The first one is the net present value. And as you can see on the third column, the net present value is positive for all the micro watersheds. Of course, it varies from micro watershed to micro watershed, but generally we can say is positive, which shows that the PS interventions, the benefits outweigh the costs. The other criteria we considered is the benefit cost ratio. And as long as the benefit cost ratio is greater than 1, it shows that the benefits again outweigh the costs. So in this case also, all the benefit cost ratios are greater than 1. And the last criteria we considered is the internal rate of return. And the decision criteria for the internal rate of return is as long as the internal rate of return is greater than the discount rate, which is 8%, then still the project remain feasible. And based on this criteria as well, you can see the sixth column. So all the values are greater than 8, which shows again that the results are favorable, which means that the benefits outweigh the costs. So it's also normal, customary to conduct a sensitivity analysis because in the cost-benefit analysis we make lots of assumptions. So to test the robustness of the results for different assumptions, so we introduce higher discount rate, which is 12%, and higher maintenance costs, which is 30% and 10%. That means 30% for measures constructed on agricultural land and 10% for conservation measures constructed on other land uses. Next slide. So as you can see from the graphs, again, under these assumptions also, the results remain feasible. So the first diagram is the net present value under different assumptions like 8% discount rate, 12% discount rate, and 10 and 30% maintenance costs. Anyways, in all cases, the decision criteria show that the outcomes are favorable. That means the benefit outweigh the cost. Next slide. Yeah, so generally we can say that PS interventions would result in improved watershed services. We have seen that, especially we considered, sediment reduction and infiltration and increase in water flow, some of the watershed services, which shows a positive result as a result of the interventions from the PS measures. And we have shown also that it results in increased productivity, which improves the well-being or the livelihood of both especially the upstream communities. So this is compared to the business as usual scenario, of course. So these two shows that PS is feasible and should be implemented in the micro watersheds. But we have also noticed that there are capacity and transaction cost bottlenecks, which requires the attention of different actors. And of course, the literature suggests that the involvement of actors outside of the exchange could reduce these costs, especially the transaction costs can be reduced by involving actors outside the exchange. That's why I think the role of the Helvetas and the Water Resource Institute and the Abbay Basin Development Office are very important in addressing these issues. And of course, development partners should also play their part by assisting in different forms, especially at the early stage of designing and implementing the PS program, because of these capacity and transaction cost issues. Next slide. I think the lessons learned will be covered by Ribka. So Ribka, over to you.
Thank you. As a lesson learned during the project duration, we have learned a multi-stakeholder participation is critical. Unless we have engaged all multi-stakeholders in the process of the system or the project implementation, we couldn't have achieved or we couldn't make it. So a multi-stakeholder participation is very important. And the other thing is a strong government participation or government commitment is very important also. Unless we have a committed governance in every stage of the implementation of the PS system, we couldn't have also make it. So strong government participation is very important. We need also a continuous engagement and coordination is very essential. As long as we are working together and continuously engage in every steps and procedures of the project implementation, we couldn't make it and we should have to engage in everything. And the ongoing institutional capacity building is also very important in every stage at Warada, zone, and the Kabali level, especially the main actors, the watershed cooperatives and communities should have capacitated, and we should have also built the capacity of the implementers. Finally, it's very important to consider or to look for the financial resources are very important. Unless we have an efficient financial resource, we couldn't also restore the upper catchments, and the required results may not come without the absence of financial resource. So a sustainable financing system or a financial resource is very important. As a vision for the next phase, we have tried to scale up these activities beyond the 5 micro watersheds. We will have a plan to scale it to at least 15 micro watersheds in the area. And we have also a plan to prove land restoration that reduces sedimentation in the reservoirs. So a lot of land and water restoration activities that have an efficient way of reducing in sedimentation will be planned in the future. We also have a plan to mobilize additional resources to set up the compensation mechanism. Financial mobilization is very important in order to scale up and to just have a required result in the case of compensation for ecosystem service. And we have also a plan, PS schemes functional by demonstrating benefits, which means an evidence-based information and a benefit that come up from the upper catchment should be realized, and a PS scheme that have a good benefit in the ecosystem service will make it as a demonstration in the future. and we should have also to replicate in another 2 sites that have similar schemes, MPS schemes, and we have a plan also to support the national PS policies and frameworks at national level. With this, thank you all for listening, and over to you, Dr. Zablon, for the next questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ribka, and thank you so much, Dr. Jemal. Now I'll open the floor to the audience for any questions, and I can also switch over to the chat to get some of the questions if they're posted there. One question I'm getting, Ribka, is how do you see a sustainable financial system scaling up the other projects? Ribka, can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a good question for the scaling up and for the future fate of this project and such kind of projects in the country. A sustainable financing is very important, and we are trying to create a sustainable financing system at national level. We are working with the Ministry of Water and Energy in order to approve the national water use charge, and this water use charge is serving as a financial pool at the national level, which will be backflow to the watershed management practice in around the basins of the country. So this is one of the source of the future financial pool. And the other thing is the finance source coming from the compensation for ecosystem service. We are trying to create a PS schemes in every aspects of the water sector, with the irrigation, with the hydropowers, and such kind of combination will create a sustainable financing, and this financing system will flow to the institutions of the watershed cooperatives, and the watershed cooperatives will encourage and engage in land and water restoration in the upper catchments. So this kind of financial flow will create for scaling up of the future planned PS schemes in the future.
Great, thank you, Ribka. The next question is for Dr. Jemal from Benedict from Arup. How do you account for uncertainties around future scenarios in your approach? And the examples are climatic scenarios, population development, economic growth, etc. And will this influence PES? So accounting for uncertainties, and how do those conditions influence payment for ecosystem services? Dr. Jemal, over to you.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, and thank you for that. As it's mentioned, the uncertainties are very important factors that will affect the outcome of cost-benefit analysis. But I think for this exercise, we conducted a simple cost-benefit analysis. So we didn't take into account this kind of uncertainties, but obviously, the facts like population growth, economic growth will have their own repercussions, both in the positive and otherwise direction. But since the assignment was to conduct a quick and a simple cost benefit analysis, we didn't consider that one into our consideration.
Great, thank you, Dr. Jemal. Maybe one last question. We only have 1 minute, so hopefully we can get to that. If not, we can reach out by email. How let me see this one. Yeah. One thing that's not clear to me is how do you exactly quantify the benefits of the projects in dollar amounts? Is it a willingness to pay only?
Uh,
How
yeah.
are these benefits quantified in terms of value?
Yeah, I think the benefits we considered mainly are like soil erosion and sediment reduction. And the second one is like water infiltration and increasing water flow. And the third one is an increase in productivity. So what we did is, there are different studies we try to quantify. For example, the value of sediment reduction per hectare per year. So we try to apply, value transfer from those studies to our current study. The same to the water infiltration and water flow increment. But for the productivity increment, because we have production data in each micro watershed, and so we try to estimate the percentage increment of production and productivity as a result of the conservation measures. And from that, we try to multiply that one by the price of, for example, each crop, and we try to estimate the monetary value of the gain in productivity. So we apply value transfer for the first two, that